Investor Group on Climate Change. My name is Serena Lee. I am Manager of Investor Practice at AIGCC, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. Next slide, please. Before we begin, please note a few housekeeping rules. Today's webinar will be recorded until the breakout session. Participants can choose to listen to this webinar in Thai or in English. There is a button at the bottom of the Zoom where you can choose your language. Participants are encouraged to keep their cameras on, especially for the breakout room sessions that we'll have later. We welcome questions in the chat box throughout the webinar, which you can type in either Thai or in English. And please note that we will have a photo taking session with all participants at the end of today's webinar. And now we will formally open with opening remarks from SEC Thailand and AIGCC. First, we will begin with a pre-recorded session from Mrs. Ponang Nong Butsaratragun, Secretary General of SEC Thailand. I'll have my colleague Wisnu start sharing the pre-recording. Thank you, Wisnu.
Ms. Rebecca Mikula Wright, the CEO of Asia Investor Group on Climate Change, distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, สวัสดีค่ะ and a very good morning. On behalf of the SEC Thailand, I would like to join AIGCC in welcoming everyone to our co-hosted workshop on developing a climate action transition plan for investors. As you may be aware, Thailand's goal is to reach net zero emission by 2065. This year seems incredibly far ahead and leads some of us to think that it is the duty of the next generation to achieve this important target. However, climate change is a global issue that cannot be put aside, as it presents serious risks that demands our pressing attention. We are in the midst of summer and many of us are already feeling the most intense heat waves. We can only mitigate this global warming by taking immediate and urgent steps to cut greenhouse emissions. Allow me to begin this workshop by asking everyone two fundamental questions. Firstly, where are we with regards to emission reduction? And secondly, what steps must be taken to ensure this happens? I believe the answer to the first question is clear. We are far from the net zero target. The great challenge certainly requires more aggressive and practical efforts in translating our commitments into actions. For SEC Thailand, one of our priorities as a capital market regulator is to ensure that we create a sustainable financial ecosystem that can drive our country towards becoming a low-carbon economy, while allowing our market participants to address the impact of climate change on economic sustainability. Considering the huge financing requirements to address climate issues, the asset managers must continue to facilitate climate-friendly investments, and the SEC Thailand will ensure that our asset managers are well equipped with the right tools to help them succeed in their stewardship roles as well as their journey toward net zero. Today's workshop will be introducing Investor Climate Action Plans Expectation Ladder, or what we call ICAP. It is a framework that shows how asset managers can progress on climate action, and it is designed to support asset managers no matter where you are in your climate journey, from beginner to leadership. As a famous saying goes, a goal without a plan is just a wish. Therefore, I hope everyone will find this workshop useful in getting to know how to plan to achieve the net zero goal and start monitoring them with dedication and commitment. In closing, I would like to reiterate that Thailand is facing an exceptional climate challenge, one that demands urgent and combined effort from everyone in the capital markets, including asset managers. I would like to express my appreciation, my gratitude to AIGCC, all the distinguished speakers, and all of you for your dedication to this cause. With that, thank you, and I wish all of you an insightful and productive workshop ahead.
We thank Mrs. Ponano's inspiring opening remarks. Next, we have Mrs. Rebecca McCullough-Wright, CEO of AIGCC, to present opening remarks from AIGCC. Thank you, Beck.
Thank you, Serena. And as Serena said, my name's Rebecca McCullough-Wright. I'm the CEO of the Investor Group on Climate Change, or AIGCC. I'd really like to thank the Secretary General for her remarks today, and the team from the Securities and Exchange Commission in Thailand for inviting us to co-host this really special event. We'd like to thank you, the participants, as well as our interpreters, for the support today to make it successful. So some of you may be aware, AIGCC is an initiative to create awareness and encourage action among asset owners and managers active in Asia about the risks and opportunities associated with climate change and low carbon investing. We have over 70 members from 11 markets across Asia, investing or representing over $35 trillion in assets under management. So the webinar we have today on developing a climate action transition plan for investors comes at a time when we're seeing increasing regulatory bodies and industry stakeholders require institutional investors to enhance your disclosure and demonstrate the climate considerations in their investment portfolios. Forward-looking climate action plans are critical for investors to really track and clearly communicate their climate progress, as well as signal expectations with their investee companies, regulatory bodies, and policymakers. So in a couple of weeks' time, AIGCC will release our annual Net Zero Investment Survey, which shows close to 60% of our members identified the local policy and regulatory landscape as a key driver of investor climate action. And we're seeing this across the region and, of course, globally as well, which is very encouraging, but we need to do more and we need to act faster. And frameworks like we'll talk about today can help you do that. We know that addressing climate change is a global collaborative challenge that needs to be tackled together. And we're already seeing more interest from regulators in developing transition plans that incorporate climate as part of the process. The opening remarks by Mrs. Bisanatragong noted the important role of the SEC Thailand, which will continue to support Thailand's capital market in addressing the economics impacts of climate change, as well as the steps needed to achieve the emissions reductions towards Thailand's net zero goal by 2065. So just bringing it back to the Thai context, Thailand is making really great headway on its climate change initiatives. And obviously you in the audience today are probably very familiar with the fact that the SEC Thailand released the Thai language version of the TCFD recommendations last October to really help enhance the understanding of climate-related financial disclosures in the Thai capital market. So we were very honoured at AIGCC to support SEC Thailand in its climate action efforts. And our work was incorporated into the guidelines for climate risk management last year. So we're really delighted to be co-hosting this webinar today to develop climate action transition plans for investors. So the next 2 hours, you're going to hear from AIGCC members who will introduce a tool that we've developed with global peers that the Secretary General referred to, the Investor Climate Action Plans, or ICAPs for short, which can support you in your climate journey. And as she mentioned, the Investor Climate Action Plans highlights actions that investors can take to accelerate their climate ambition and progress, no matter where you are on your journey. And that's what's great about this framework, that any investor can use it and incorporate it. We really welcome investors who are starting on their climate integration journey, as well as more advanced investors who are keen to take the next steps, because it's a journey for everybody. Doesn't matter where your starting point is. So I'm also very excited to announce that we have just released the Thai translation of one of the ICAP's resources, the Expectations Ladder, which will help you particularly. And so we really want to thank again the SEC Thailand for the support in the process of this, bringing this translated version to you. And we really hope it is a tool that can be widely used in the market. So today we have two of our members, two institutional investors, here with us to share their experiences and top tips in how to develop an investor climate action plan. So I think you'll find this incredibly valuable to hear from them and to learn about different ways to accelerate your climate ambition and progress. So with that, I'm going to hand over and really get underway so you can start listening to the practitioners around what they're doing on climate. Thank you so much, and really wish you well, and we hope that we will work with you in the future with your climate journey. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Beck. Can we have the slides back on, please? Thank you, Visnu. So please see our agenda for today. Having now listened to the opening remarks, I will be presenting a high-level introduction to the Investor Climate Action Plans. This will be followed by a deep dive by Monica Bay, Director of Investor Practice at AIGCC. We will then have a 10-minute break, upon which we will then have our guest speakers from Cathay Financial Holdings and Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Asset Management provide the practitioner's perspective on developing the ICAPs. We will then go into a breakout session to discuss and reflect about how you can implement the ICAPs into your own organizations and share the main findings in the main room afterwards. Monica will then provide the closing remarks, after which we will conclude with a photo-taking session. Next slide, please. So now we'll begin with an introduction to the Investor Climate Action Plans, or ICAPs for short. Next slide, please. So what are the ICAPs and why was it developed? In short, the Investor Climate Action Plans is a tool to support investors on climate action. As was mentioned in the opening remarks, the ICAPs as a tool supports investors no matter where they're at in their climate journey, whether they're just beginning or in the more advanced stages. The ICAPs was launched back in 2021 by 7 network partners that you see at the bottom of the slide. These include AIGCC for Asia, CDP, Series for North America, Investor Group on Climate Change, IGCC, for New Zealand and Australia, Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, IIGCC, for the UK and Europe, as well as PRI and UNFFI. And together, these 7 global network partners form the investor agenda. The ICAPs is designed as a single comprehensive framework to provide investors with clear expectations on how to issue and implement a climate action plan, as well as navigate existing climate change initiatives. The ICAPs does not replace any existing climate reporting mechanisms. The purpose of the ICAPs is threefold. First, it enables investors to address climate risk as a systemic risk systematically. Second, it's to create collective action to align climate investments at a speed and direction globally agreed on. And third, it is to help achieve net zero emissions globally. Since 2021, we have seen an increasing emphasis across different regulatory bodies on the need for clear, credible transition plans. That is, a climate action plan that outlines how investors will take credible steps to transition its strategy and operations to align with a net zero future. Next slide, please. So there are 3 key resources on the Investor Agenda website as it relates to the ICAPs. The first is the ICAPS Expectations Ladder. The second is the ICAPS Guidance Document. And third are several case studies from investors, asset owners, and asset managers across the globe. So the Investor Expectations Ladder, the ICAPS Expectations Ladder, is a summary of actions across 4 interlocking areas that you see in the diamond shape on this slide. These are investment, corporate engagement, policy advocacy, investor disclosure, and across an overarching theme of governance. The ladder demonstrates how to accelerate ambition across a 4-tiered approach, starting from Tier 4 for those just thinking about climate change to Tier 1 for those who are more in the leadership stages. Actions are initiative neutral, meaning that you do not need to join any initiatives in order to be able to use the ICAPs. The goal is to ensure that investors are acting across all areas of the ICAPs over time. Second is the ICAPS Guidance Document. This explains the ladder, as well as how to develop climate actions across the tiers. It also points to the tools that network partners have developed to support climate progress. And third is the investor case studies, which are available on the Investor Agenda website. You will also be hearing from 2 Asia-based investors who have developed ICAPs in the latter part of the discussion. The ladder and guidance are updated every 2 years to keep up with the latest science and evolving trends. The most recent and second version of the ladder was updated last year in 2023. Some of the key updates include aligning with net zero investment methodologies and frameworks, as well as providing further information related to deforestation. Next slide, please. So how have the ICAPs been integrated into SCC Thailand? As was noted earlier, we are honored to be integrated as part of SCC Thailand's capacity building guidelines for climate risk management work. And as Rebecca mentioned, in an effort to continue this support, we are very pleased to mention that we will be releasing the Thai version of the ICAPS Expectations Ladder. And we would like to acknowledge SCC Thailand's help in reviewing the translation of the Thai version. Next slide, please. Before we begin the next session on the deep dive, this slide is a high-level overview to introduce a few terminologies to you. This is an image of the ICAPS ladder, where you see number 1, focus area. We mentioned the focus areas of investment, corporate engagement, policy advocacy, investor disclosure, across an overarching theme of governance. This image depicts investor disclosure focus areas at the top. Next, where you see number 2 is subcategories. Each of the focus areas will have subcategories. So under the investor disclosure pillar, you'll see that there are 5 subcategories. These include commitments, objectives, and targets, emissions reports, portfolio assessment, TCFD alignment, and progress and assessment report. Then we will introduce number 3, the tiers. You'll see this consistently shown across the top of each of the focus areas. From left to right, it's starting with Tier 4, moving across to Tier 1. And finally, you'll see number 4, the summary of actions across each of the subcategories. What you'll notice is that the actions become more ambitious as you move across the tiers. If we take the second subcategory as an example on emissions reporting, you'll see that to self-assess in Tiers 4 and Tier 3, you will need to publish a greenhouse gas emissions report for at least 1 portfolio of asset class. By Tier 1, it becomes more detailed as you break this down into scopes 1, 2, and 3, as well as providing explanation on any omissions. It is helpful to recognize that investors may be across different tiers, across different areas. That is, investors may be in tier 1 in corporate engagement, but in tier 4 in investment. They may be even across different tiers within the same focus areas. As we draw to a close on this introduction, I want us to reflect on 2 fundamental questions that was highlighted by Mrs. Pornangnong. First is where we're at in terms of emissions reduction. And second, what steps must be taken to ensure that this happens. With the introductory knowledge that you have now, we hope that you start to see the ICAP's expectations ladder as a tool to support you in addressing these questions. Next slide, please. Before we end this section, we wanted to do a quick stock take by doing 2 poll questions here, which Wisnu will help launch now. The responses will be anonymous, and we hope that you can help us respond to these questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think let's end the poll here and share the initial results. Thank you. So as you can see that there are some asset managers in the room today who have already developed climate policy, but a majority might consider this in their future climate action plans. We have also seen varying results when it comes to whether or not an institutional investor has developed an action plan or sustainability report. Thank you very much. We'll stop sharing this poll now and move on to the next session. Next slide, please. I'm delighted now to welcome Ms. Monica Bay, Director of Investor Practice, to share with us a deep dive across the different focus area. Thank you, Monica. Over to you.
Thank you, Serena, and a warm welcome to everyone who joined this webinar and workshop today. So a deep dive into the different focus area that Serena had mentioned, and how I see the Investor Climate Action Plan really is a strategy building exercise for investors on their own journey towards net zero. So while listening to the different areas, I think it'd be good to have a perspective of how yourselves internally will build a strategy. And it's not only a strategy for companies to change within the portfolios, but it's also a strategy building for the investors themselves. Next slide, please. And I want to start off with a quick stock take of where the Asian investors are right now. And this really draws from the survey that we had done and a desktop research of over 200 investors across Asia, including over 180 headquartered in the Asian region, as well as 7 within the Thai market as well. And you can see here that there are some investors who have started to set and implement a climate transition plan, whether that is in terms of an investment climate action plan or other transition plans as well. But as you have seen in your own poll results just now, a majority of the investors are really thinking about this right now and seeing what needs to be done in implementing and adopting what a comprehensive climate action plan really is as well. Next slide, please. So first, I will start off with the first focus area of governance. For each of the areas, what I will do is I will go into explaining about a specific focus area, the components or subcategories of these focus areas, and also explain into how we work with investors within AIGCC to implement these subcategories or some of the focus areas, as well as showing some of our survey results as well of each of the corresponding areas. So for the governance, I will spend a little bit more time of the 30 minutes on the governance area because I do think this is a real starting point and also an area where it really cuts across of all other 4 areas, as well as a key to where investors will be thinking about at their earlier journey and how important it is to reflect back into the governance as we develop and interlock between the other areas of Investor Climate Action Plan as well. So you can see here that it really does go across the investment, corporate engagement, policy advocacy, and investor disclosure as well. The oversight is very important. And then the subcategories of policy, this is the investment internal policies, accountability, planning and evaluation, skill assessments, and board reporting. Next slide. And these subcategories are explained in a little bit more further detail here, but I do want to touch upon maybe how these areas really interact to really support the actions and decisions investors take that underpin the robust decision-making that a good governance framework really provides as well. For the discussion today, I will focus a little bit more on the first category of investment policy and kind of explain to you how that's reflected over the tiers as you progress as well. So investment policy, as you have seen, is one of the first areas of how to incorporate and define what the climate-related elements are. So really seeing how the organizations approach in managing climate risks and opportunities and including that as part of the investment policy or guidelines so that as these developed, they translate into overall investments and actions taken on a company-wide approach by the investors as well. And you can see that in the tier 4 element is considering climate-related, the risks and opportunities. But as you progress, it does require a lot more specific areas so that is it time-bound? So timelines within those policies, the details around it. Does the policies have a science-based or are they linked to transition scenarios and pathways of a specific sector or a region or a country? What's the scope? What are the conditions, exclusions, etc.? So these elements are all considered, and as you progress on the journey, you probably get to understand that you also need to consider such other policies as engagement policies. What is your corporate engagement policies with the companies internally, like within your portfolios? Do you have a some start off with exclusion, but it doesn't stop there. A lot of times it's a subset of high emitting sectors where a lot of investors will focus on. And further on the journey, it would also include high emitting sectors such as fossil fuel policies, as well as deforestation related or nature related policies as well. And the real factor why this is so important is that it really translates into the long-term value creation and the duties that investors really have towards your clients and beneficiaries as well. Next slide, please. I will just touch upon some of the work that's done internally with our own members within AIGCC on this, because we recognize all these investment policies, the different areas, the requirements. It's an on-moving, it's not a standalone, it's not prescriptive. And also, it really depends on the approaches of the different investors and the views as well. So as an example, we had a discussion around what are some of the best practices in engagement with corporates towards net zero for investors in the Asian region, and what does that look like in the different markets? So we had a very open, closed-door discussion amongst the investors and practitioners who are involved in the corporate engagement, and also how it differs between the investments and the investment styles and the policies they have internally as well. Another good example is the fossil fuel policies that investors have. And we had discussed this in terms of how to progress or promote fossil fuel phase out in a sense. Specifically, we are talking in the terms of a early coal phase out, and whether or not the fossil fuel policies, or sometimes in some cases, the lack of or non-policies would affect or promote these kind of thinking and transactions going forward. One of the things that we have found that is the policies there's no one approach to it. It evolves over time, and sometimes there are different rationales internally within the investors to have a certain angle over another. So which really means these kind of dialogue and understanding not only builds the capacity of investors, but also it shows the dynamic needs of different investors in the different markets that they operate in as well. Next slide, please. I just want to touch upon, this is a survey result. So I had mentioned that we will go into the survey results for each of the areas. And it shows that for many of the investors, they have started their inclusion of climate change within their investment policies. But there is still also some that are probably looking, and I know within our own membership as well, some of the investors who are relatively on the earlier journey who are still working through, and this does not mean they're not working through, it still is a process that they are going through to incorporate these elements as part of their internal process as well. Next slide, please. Thus to touch upon the element that Serena had mentioned, that we do or will have the Thai translation available for you as well, to be able to log in and see for yourselves. And you can see the different tiers, the different subcategories, and then the action points that need to be considered along the different tiers as well. And in no way is this prescriptive. It is a way for investors to consider and to adopt as well. Next slide, please. The second focus area I will go into is the investment as well. Next slide. The investment pillar, the ultimate goal really is, how do we interpret and look into our investments to achieve and align to the Paris Agreement and limit the global temperature rise as well? So here, I would say there are two ways of perspectives and looking at this. One is more on the decarbonization. So the emissions reduction is a focus of your own portfolio emissions, and how that affects, it doesn't stop at the portfolio emissions reduction, but how that really affects the real economy decarbonization as well. So as investors, what elements you will need to consider and look into to do that. The other equation of this investment is that it really needs scaling up of new investments. So as you had heard before, is a lot of capital is needed to support the low carbon economy transition. So what are the new areas of investments are needed? And this really, because it is a real structure change of the economy that the investors need to support, is identifying what is necessary and to make sure that there is a scale up of new investments in the new areas, and that the capital flows into those areas as well. So this is why I have mentioned earlier, it really is a strategy building exercise as well. And you can see how the governance portion of views and elements will be incorporated into the investments and building of the investments as well. Here we have 4 subcategories, which is the target setting, strategy, risk management, and asset allocation as well. Next slide, please. So target setting is more related to both, I would say, both of the areas that I have mentioned, both on the decarbonization. So a lot of times when you start off, you will look into the measurements of your greenhouse gas emissions within your own portfolios and setting a target of a long-term target as well as a mid-term target, interim target as well, and really look into how that affects the real economy. But also another portion of the target setting is the scaling up of the investments as well. And we see more and more investors having a target towards climate solutions or other areas of investments of aligning the portfolio and align the investments towards a low carbon economy. And you see both of the targets interacting with each other as well. And then you see the strategy, which I would say the strategy really goes, a portion of it, you may think of it as relating to the investment policies that I had mentioned previously as well. But it really goes beyond that because it's setting out what kind of priorities or overall objectives would you have? What kind of real economy support or elements would you need to see as well, and making a decision to work or prioritize some areas over others as well. So the strategy building is a really key component, and to be able to do that, you would need the risk management portion integrated into it, and that will translate into the capital asset allocation that you will have, depending whether that's a sectoral approach, a different asset class approach as well. Next slide, please. And I wanted to just share with you some of the net zero, I would say, methodologies and guidelines that are out there. And this net zero investment framework was developed by some of the network partners that we work with globally as well. And it was a framework that was really, kind of made by investors for investors. And is one that is probably adopted by about 2/3 of global investors who have committed to net zero and setting a net zero target as well. Next slide, please. And here you can see how the net zero investment framework on your right, how the different targets are translated. A lot of times the investors would have a long-term net zero target. That would sometimes include all or portion of your assets, depending on your strategies and your clients and other areas that you would need to look into. It also incorporates a short-term decarbonization target, but you will also see other areas as climate solutions where the scaling up of investments is and others as well. You can also see that a lot more investors have looked into the decarbonization of their portfolios as one of the main targets. But just like to stress that over time, from this last year, this year, and going forward, you'll probably see a lot more discussion into how these net zero targets translate and support the flow of capital, and how it will support the climate solutions or other areas of investments that's much needed as well. And you can see on the left-hand side how the different asset owners, asset managers, and our members have a net zero target. That's the long-term target. but also the need and importance of a short-term target. And here you see a little less, but because there's normally what generally happens for investors, they have set a commitment. And for the short-term targets to be announced, they would need to work through a very detailed plan of what is in scope and out of scope and what can be achieved in the shorter term as well. And the net zero investment framework is one of the tools that are used to set the short-term targets. The next slide, please. Just want to go back into our translations that the investments, we have the subcategories here again, as well as the different tiers of how to progress along the different tiers from tier 4 up to tier 1 as well. Next slide. I'd like to start upon the corporate engagement, which is another focus area. And the corporate engagement pillar, I would say, is, next slide, please, is really the ability of investors, how they can directly influence the corporate practices within their own portfolios and the performances as well. And one of the areas that we have seen over and over again is the essential role how the quality of disclosures really play. And that's one of the core reasons and one of the areas that we have always requested when we talk about these elements and ask companies to have a consistency and a good climate disclosure, for companies to have a clear transition plans and the relevant matrix that they are using, along with how they're portioning their capital and use of capital as well. So these areas really play quite a key role in the engagements. And you can see on the right, the subcategories, engagement initiatives, bilateral engagements, and corporate escalation and shareholder engagement as well. Next slide, please. And if I can go into a little bit more detail on these three subcategories, is that for engagement initiatives, I would say it is a more of a collaborative or a group of investors joining together to do a very much like investor relations type of engagement with corporate, but really a focus around climate change. And we have two such initiatives that we support within AIGCC that we are part of. One is a global initiative, the Climate Action 100+, which really targets the highest emitters globally. So there's over 170 companies with over 700 investors participating in this initiative globally. And for the Asian companies, AIGCC is part of the network partner who runs that in Asia. The second element initiative I want to highlight is AIGCC's Asian Utilities Engagement Program, where we have worked with investors to really work with 7 companies across 5 markets to really see and support the energy transition that is needed in those markets as well. But this does not stop the second subcategory, which is the bilateral engagement, which is an ongoing element where investors would bilaterally reach out and talk to the companies as well. And the third subcategory that we see is the corporate escalation, where after the engagements, either under an initiative or bilaterally, you see limited progress, then in some cases, we see more and more elements of escalation elements coming in. So whether that is through letter writing or individual dialogue or proxy voting, in some cases, we see more and more of that in some of the markets, or escalation between specific directors within the companies. So these are some of the elements that we do see. And as investors engage and talk with companies more, we'll probably see a bit more of these elements coming up as well. Next slide, please. So I did want to touch upon the climate action a little bit more and how the investors really ask the companies to have a clear, good climate governance and to have the action plans and to have a good climate disclosure as well. So we mentioned this as the 3 R's of Climate Action 100+. You can go into the website to see a much more detailed elements, and there's also a net zero company benchmark where there's 11 different categories where investors would discuss and talk with the companies as well. And then you also have the expectations that we have under the Asian Utilities Program as well. The next slide, please. You see here that this is the survey yet again of the 200+ investors that we have. And you see here that we see a lot more active elements within the engagement, probably because within our members, they will participate more in the engagements that we have. But also, one of the elements that we do see more and more is that there's more interest, especially from this region by asset managers, to understand what the corporate engagements are, and also to join an initiative as well. So one of the core elements that we have mentioned is by joining one of the collaborative initiatives is a great way to learn about how other investors view and engage with companies, so that you can also incorporate not only for the companies that are under the initiatives, but generally broader with other companies that you would engage with bilaterally as well. Next slide, please. And here you see the different areas of the subcategories and the tiers in Thai again. Next slide. The other area is the policy advocacy. If I can go on to the next slide. So the policy advocacy, just to, the main elements here really is the enabling environment for investors, so they can unlock the investments opportunities and the scale of capital that's needed to flow in the capital to the areas that's needed, whether that's within the low carbon assets. Recently, we've been talking a lot more on the adaptation side, as well as the elements of just transition within the context of transition as well. So also to really protect the long-term returns of the investors. And here we see the subcategories of investor statements, lobbying, and advocacy as well. Next slide, please. I want to just touch upon the investment statement, because we have programs and initiatives where, such as the Global Investor Statement to governments as an open letter to governments to act on climate crisis, to really aim and achieve the net zero by 2050 or elements, and to incorporate the credible interim targets into their policies as well. So this is a letter that goes out to the governments that we are part of. It's run by the different 7 network partners that we have mentioned previously as well. So many investors will look to participate and kind of voice through those letters, which are the investor statements. The lobbying, I would say, is a little bit higher level than participating in the investor statements as well. This really is looking at the lobbying of the companies relating to climate issues, but also sometimes it includes areas of talking and discussing with trade associations or industry bodies, so that the associations lobbying and the goals are aligned with the Paris agreements and the objectives of that as well. The third subcategory is the advocacy. So here the policy advocacy really, it could be both intergovernmental elements, whether it's G7, G20, UNFCCC, and other international regulatory bodies or frameworks. But also there's elements of in-market government dialogue, I would put it, where really to show what the investors are thinking and which elements need to be brought forward or considered to really make the investments flow happen as well. And we do this quite a bit within the Asian Utilities Engagement Program, especially with energy plans or in the utility sector within certain governments, bringing in a multi-stakeholder approach with investors, with policymakers, and in some cases, companies themselves as well. Next slide, please. And just to highlight that this is an example of the global investment statement that we had put forward. So after the slides are shared, you can look into the details and read what a global investment statement looks like as well. Next slide. And you can see that if you look into where the Asian investors are in terms of climate-related policy advocacy, is that I would say relatively it is still at a more earlier stage, but we do see more and more investors interested to become more active in this area. And especially for those who are looking to set or have set net zero targets, they would need to incorporate this as part of their work and strategy and thinking as well. Next slide, please. And this is the context of the translations with the subcategory and tiers in Thai. Next slide, please. I will touch upon the last area of focus, which is the investor disclosure. Next slide. Just to highlight that this last focus area is for the investor themselves. So the area of companies or portfolio companies disclosure would be under the corporate engagement pillar of work. Here is really looking at how investors are incorporating their climate-related risk and opportunities, how they're assessing, managing, and communicating with their clients, beneficiaries, and other stakeholders as well. And the areas that are here on the right-hand side, the subcategories are that you can see the commitments, objectives, and targets. Another is the emissions reporting, portfolio assessments, TCFD alignment, and the progress and assessment reporting as well. Next slide, please. One of the areas, as we are talking about more on how to get on the journey towards net zero, consider the climate elements. I want to mention a few elements that we have seen within other investors who have gone through the process as well, is that by publishing and really building on this shows real accountability and the progress that the investors have. And and it's a great tool to communicate the thinking behind where the investors are as well. One of the elements that we have seen is that as investors, especially those who have set net zero targets or looking to set net zero targets, that as they reveal and include their reporting, their own reporting, they have seen that the difference or the gap they need to address, especially in the interim target that they have set, is a kind of an area that they would need to focus on. And that is why the corporate engagement, the elements of the policy advocacy all come into play. And through this process of investor disclosure, this also feeds back into the governance, how to build on the strategy for the overall structure for investors as well. Next slide, please. You see here from the overall disclosures or the survey results of 200 plus investors in Asia that many have started, I would say, on their own disclosure journey, especially the asset managers who are more regulated in the markets with the recommendations and support of TCFD in many of the markets or specific regulations coming out as well. But also we would like to see a bit more support, I would say, from the asset owners who are starting, but also slightly slower in their disclosures or element, but we are seeing that change with asset owners as well as asset managers. And we hope to see those, the disclosures as they progress on, that we will see more of how investors transition in their own journey is released through these publications as well. Next slide, please. And with this, I will conclude that once again, there is going to be a detailed translation. It will be available to you through our website and the Investor Agenda website. And now we would move on to a quick break. So back to Serena.
Thank you, Monica. We will now pause the recording and go into a 10-minute break, after which we will have our two guest speakers join us. So I'm delighted to welcome Ms. Sophia Cheng and Mr. Takashi Wada to join us today to give a 10-minute presentation each on their existing ICAPs and how they came to develop these plans. And just a reminder to those in the audience that please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, either in Thai or in English, and we will respond to them accordingly. So let's begin. Next slide, please. With Ms. Sophia Cheng, Chief Investment Officer of Cathay Financial Holdings. Thank you, Sophia. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sophia Cheng. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Cathay Financial Holdings. It's my honor today to share with you some of the efforts and experience we have through these climate actions. And we are very happy that with consistent effort since 2016 to now, we have been able to develop new actions every year and think about what our investee companies and bank borrowers they need, how to further enhance their knowledge, how to lead our stakeholders together from climate to water, biodiversity, and nature issues. So pretty much we learn with our stakeholders. And we also think the best way to make some progress is to learn from the best global practice. So we joined AIGCC in 2016. And I'm very honored that we have been able to learn, contribute, and make impact together. In the next few minutes, I will share some of the Cathay efforts. And today's case, we will use Cathay Life experience in the ICAP performance. Cathay Life is part of Cathay Financial Holdings. It's the largest subsidiary under this holding company. It accounts for about 60% of Cathay Financial Holdings' total asset. Our group total invested asset is about $400 billion US, and Cathay Life is about 226 billion. So that's roughly a quarter of the life insurance industry in Taiwan. We are also very happy to see our peers. We also have our other peers join as a member, and I think we are seeing very fast acceleration by asset owner and asset manager in pushing responsible investment and climate change. And Serena asked me to share some of the tips how we develop a climate action strategy. To me, it's actually quite easy. Learn and do it, and then review how we can do better and learn new things and do more things. And so the first tip is think about everything is possible. Don't think about difficulty and impossible, because after we do it, we can see the bottleneck. So that's first. And then second is, when we try to do climate action, it includes our own operation and also how we influence others. We always take the counterparty's challenge as our challenge. So we try to learn what are they facing, their level of knowledge, the challenge they see, can we find solution for them? So most of the engagement target, they know we come with very good intention. This is also very helpful for them building the trust, and we can have better communication through the journey. And the third one is learning from good international framework. To the right-hand side of the slides, you can see that we started to follow TCFD in 2018, and we learned the ICAP. ICAP has 4 tiers of the different working performance. So through the 4 ICAP expectation ladder, we can know at different level, how can we do better? So taking a serious look into this good framework, it's very useful toolkit. And then I can do self-assessment. And I can learn, okay, on the next stage, what action, what target I can do. And so it's very good framework that we can apply. So, and then international recognized standard. For example, after SBTI, we now with TNFD, we also put a lot of effort learning about SBTN. So following the trend, and we don't have to start with everything we need to do in one go, but at least learning the trend and see through the meaning behind those new framework, and including, for example, recently the combination of sustainability information and accounting standard. Then after we understand the meaning, we can pick whatever area we can do first. That will be very useful. So follow international framework, international trend will make us to catch up the speed much faster. At the meantime, being one of the largest financial institutions, we can think about how to localize to Asia, how to localize to Taiwan. Next page. I will share a few of our efforts, some of the performance, how so far what we have done. When we look at the portfolio climate change risk management, we need to review based on the international methodology, where are we? And then what simulation tools we can do to do constant review. If we do no change, or if we have some action, how we will look like in the future. So on the left-hand side of the slides, you can see the backward looking. It's basically calculating on the carbon intensity for our portfolio. For every $1 million US of revenue of our investee companies, how many tons of CO2 they need to emit to reach their revenue. And by calculating that, we already have the number since 2018. And I can look at the carbon intensity for both equity and fixed income portfolio. In the recent years, we also developed deeper into the carbon emission-related management metrics for our real estate. We also start to work on more to our alternative investment, the external manager, how they can do better. So once we learn something, we will pass to the mandate manager, so we can really fulfill the responsibility. No ESG, no money, no climate action. Probably we will start to let go some of the mandate to the manager. And I think that's something that as a manager can help to push. On this chart to the left-hand side, you can see 2020. You can see the carbon intensity, the red number from 94 down to about 71. So we never start with a target, it must reduce. No, but because we have this number, we can review, do self-assessment, and this will be very good dialogue foundation among the investment team and research team. So naturally, once we provide information to the investment team members, they will take a look, they start to care more, and we were quite impressed. Over the past 6-7 years, the number constantly come down. But we did not give the investment team pressure. You must have the carbon intensity going down. Yeah. So once they do the analysis, they realize the beauty of doing that, and things will just happen. The number 2 to the left-hand side of forward-looking is we use MSCI, the climate value at risk. So the CVA will tell us on transition risk and physical risk, what methodology assumption we use. And then combined transition risk and physical risk. My current portfolio is encouraging how much loss, and is stimulating the air temperature up to how many degrees. So we put a lot of effort in the procurement of database with science data, methodology, then people have good foundation to discuss. So you can see this will be a different situation, a scenario, how they will affect my net worth. Then I can see, okay, if I don't want to have that loss, what else extra effort we can do? So this will stimulate more interactive discussion among our team. And then we can think about if I want to do more on sustainable finance, investment, what area should it be equity or fixed income? So this is a very regular discussion we have. And then to the right-hand side, you can see my portfolio decarbonization. So we have green finance. We have to set investment target. So we have 2024, 25, 26, 2030. The target is very clear. And despite we may not be everything the super top globally, but it's always good we take the higher standard for ourselves and then come back with realistic target. We do commit to SBT, so to a year end, the targeting eventually to 1.5 degrees is must. So with all this discussion, we can set target for green investment. Transition finance is area we look for. We are also quite famous in Taiwan as a green landlord because we have more than 200 office buildings in this small island. How can we offer 100% renewable energy building? We also move to a net zero building because real estate is also an important part of our portfolio. And lastly, with our effort, how can we make an impact? So we put a lot of energy on climate engagement. We are in part of AIGCC, Climate Action 100+, Valuing Water Finance Task Force. We also join Nature Action 100+. So there's a lot of work we can do. And it's very good to join this initiative because I can learn with the peers. We can do joint collaboration and engagement. So sometimes leverage external resource, international pressure to our country, especially in Asia. It works quite well because people want to know the global practice. So if only as an investor, we go to the company, they may not really care that much. But if we have other international investors together, in general, I see the company will take it even more serious. We also look at the corporate difficulty. If they relate to government policy, we want to be the first one go to government, tell them this is a future trend. The world is moving to net zero. And so once the government make the policy confirmed, then corporate had better rule they can follow. So try to contribute engagement, not just on our investee company, but also to policymaker, the scholar, academic area, and try to enable everyone to work together. So this is a brief summary from me. I hope this is useful. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much, Sophia. And now we will go to Wada-san, Senior Stewardship Officer from Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Asset Management. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I'm Takeshi Wada from Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Asset Management. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving an opportunity to talk about ICAP, Investor Climate Action Plan. It's my pleasure. First of all, I'd like to just introduce my company. Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Asset Management is one of the largest asset managers, not only in Japan, but also in Asia, with asset under management of $617 billion, having over 40 engagement specialists, and the number of engagement is 1,700 a year globally. As a responsible institutional investor, we pursue our three key pillars of stewardship activities that are built around engagement, the exercise of voting right, and incorporating ESG factor into investment decision-making process. On top of that, we are the member of 25 global network initiatives, such as PRI, Climate Action 100+, and AIGCC, and so on. As a signatory asset manager to international guideline and principle on corporate conduct, we engage investee company while cooperating with United Nations, NGOs, and other organizations to implement activities in keeping with our signatory commitment. Next page, please. Thank you. Using this slide, I would like to explain key features of our climate action plan. At the moment, the movement toward requesting greater transparency of stewardship activity by investment company is intensifying. Reflecting these voices, the investor agenda recommends that investment company disclose information using ICAP. Sumitomo is to use the information disclosed by means of ICAP to improve the transparency of strategic activities to strengthen those activities. We conduct self-assessment of its current approach to climate change risks and opportunities in the 4 key focus areas that are shown in the left side of the slide. They are: 1. Investment, that is to manage systematic climate risks in investor portfolio and enabling transition by shifting capital to value-creating business set to succeed in the net zero future. 2. Corporate engagement, that is to engage companies to drive and demonstrate real progress in line with the 1.5-degree future. 3. Policy advocacy, that is to advocate for policies aligned with delivering a just transition to a net zero company by 2050 or sooner. And finally, 4. Investor disclosure, that is to enhance investor disclosure to help stakeholders track investor action in line with the 1.5 pathway. Among the focus area, I'd like to deep dive into our 2 approaches. One is corporate engagement. The other is policy advocacy. These are shown on the right side of the slide. First, as to corporate engagement, we have the ability to conduct comprehensive global engagement through our 3 bases in Japan, London, and New York. At Sumitomo, we believe engagement activities as opportunities to seek best practice from companies, and we communicate our views so as to contribute to the enhancement of corporate value over the medium to long term. Specifically, we will promote engagement through validation of greenhouse gas emission reduction plan by investing companies and through research on technology required for virtually zero emission by 2050 and strengthen our voting policy in regard to climate change. It is estimated that about 100 companies, 40 Japanese and 60 foreign companies, account for 40% of the total greenhouse gas emission of our invested portfolio. Means that these 100 companies have a significant impact of reducing greenhouse gas emission. Hence, we have been focusing on these companies for engagement. Then, I would like to explain our corporate escalation. We believe the exercise of voting right as an opportunity to call for a minimum standard of governance and consider it to be on one method of governance-related engagement. In exercise voting right, Sumitomo has a policy of opposing proposal for the election of directors when a portfolio company makes insufficient effort to disclose information or set greenhouse gas reduction target, and no reasonable explanation provided. Next, let's talk about the second theme, policy advocacy. First, as the investor statement, Sumitomo has been actively participating in collaborative policy engagement action around deforestation. We took the role of one of the lead investors in the IPDD, our investor policy dialogue on deforestation, to halt deforestation in Brazil and Indonesia. The result of this policy engagement include a report on dialogue activities on deforestation that were sent to authorities in Brazil and Indonesia. and a memorandum of understanding of forest conservation and restoration proposal was signed with the Stock Exchange and Chamber of Commerce of Indonesia. Second, as to advocacy, we were the only investment manager from Japan to agree and join the financial sector commitment letter on eliminating commodity-driven deforestation announced at the COP26. We recognize these two approaches of assessment, corporate engagement and policy advocacy, is equivalent to the Tier 1 in the ICAP inspection ladder. Finally, I have to say that climate change is no longer prediction. It's actually happening here in Japan, of course in Thailand. Due to this, please recognize that the ICAP's inspection ladder and guidance set out a clear pathway for investor integration that lead to an ultimate goal of net zero that must be reached wherever an investor may be on that journey. As a result, by publishing a clear and robust climate action plan using the ICAP framework and acting on it, not only us, but also Asian institutional investor can be better positioned to seize the enormous investment opportunities that are being created by transition to net zero. I hope more asset owners and asset managers in Thailand to disclose ICAP in the near future. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Selena.
Thank you very much again to both Sophia and Wada-san. It was very helpful to hear the practitioner's perspective of the ICAPs. Your work has highlighted how credible steps and actions can be vast and diverse. So we will now end today's recording, but perhaps, sorry, before we do that, there is a question on the chat for Sophia. The question is, if Sophia, you could provide an example of how Cathay's specific green investment targets and some of your criteria in choosing companies to invest in. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good. For overall the strategy you're asking about green investment target, we have already accumulated green investment, and including that water related is roughly $10 billion already. And so this is only unlisted companies. We also invest in funds. For larger company, we have been monitoring the low carbon investment across the group. So that is the area looking for increase. We also are very keen to add more green bonds, but it's very important that for the same return, we will favor green bond or sustainable related investment preferred. But at the meantime, I hope we can have better framework to avoid greenwashing. And then we also focus on new solutions. We do invest in some PE funds, which are to decarbonization fund, for example. This can apply to global, regional, or Taiwan. Where in Taiwan, if there are some related to sustainable or climate resilient projects, we'd be happy to take a look. And how to criteria for overall companies to invest. Of course, we look at fundamentals. We also look at some company if they are more predictable than the payout ratio, the dividend income. If they have shown the new solution with growth, they will be very good. They can also offer future capital gain. On top of that, ESG and the response to climate, these are minimum requirement. So we hope company not just make good money, they also, we want to know how they earn the money. So the ESG and climate change are the important element in our investment decision process. Also, we try to avoid controversial issues. If it's significant, we do have very intensive engagement. And I think that's it. And we also look at future opportunity and stress. For example, we look at stranded asset. Some industry, if they don't go for transition, they will be not popular anymore. For example, the coal exit policy, non-conventional oil related fossil fuel. So we were looking at the global progress to what level we should make some divestment or help this company to do successful transition. And recently, there's a lot of talk about global plastic treaty, and Taiwan has a big plastic-related petrochemical and plastic company. We will learn early and to come to talk to this company, see how they plan to respond. So this very active interaction with company, it will help us to differentiate who have the future, who may suffer. So it's kind of overall how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Wada-san, we also have a question for you on the chat. Which ICAP focus areas do you find most easy to implement and choose to implement first?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. So first, I would like to my situation, my company. So my department is Stewardship Development Department, which is mainly focused on engagement with company and proxy voting issue. So that for our company, and also we are the PLI signatory to PLI, so focus on more on the so PLI or something like that. So for these asset managers, I think that engagement is the best way to start the ICAP, And I think that there is a ladder. So based on the company, I think that you will choose the best ladder to start, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Wada-san. So I wonder if we have any more questions. If not, I think let's stop the recording for today.